Last but certainly not least, we have the Senate sponsor of the Fair Pay Act. We have with us Senator Gail Golden, who's been working on this for many years.
Thank you. I too want to acknowledge many of our fellow colleagues who are in the room. I know Senator Nesselbush has just walked in. Thank you. And there are many co-sponsors of these bills who are not in the room. So make sure that you have your conversations with your legislators so they can tell you whether or not they're signed on. You know, listening to everyone speak today, I can't help but think about the one thing that many of these issues have in common and sort of weaves this all together, and that's power. Who has it and who doesn't have power and who abuses it, and how that power is leaving so many of us behind. It's dividing us instead of uniting us. In the recent months, this imbalance of power has been given some long overdue public discussion it deserves, starting with the women's marches across the globe, including the amazing ones here in Providence, and continuing with the Me Too movement and the Time's Up Coalition and other efforts that are demanding justice and equality for women. The legislation we are introducing and talking about today is interrelated with these movements. Another spoke in the wheel of this overall effort to shift the power balance and move toward a more equitable and fair society. Like sexual harassment, pay discrimination is about power structures in the workplace that value women less. They are connected and together reinforce gender, racial, and other forms of inequality in our society. Cultural norms and workplace structures that are stuck in the past, and laws that do not account for the reality of today's workforce and the changing nature of work are penalizing women. We do not live in a Mad Men world. We shouldn't have laws that are stuck in one too. Women's lack of economic power in the workplace often makes them vulnerable as targets of sexual harassment. In 2015, when Representative Regenberg and I first introduced legislation to increase the tip minimum wage, I did so because I realized we had institutionalized pay disparity into our laws while also reinforcing sexual harassment. Workers who are paid only the sub-minimum wage of $3.89 an hour, and that is $1 more than when we first passed the law in 2015. When they're paid $3.89 an hour, they must rely on tips to supplement it and are forced to tolerate sexual harassment and other inappropriate behavior just to make a living. It is not surprising that 14% of sexual harassment complaints to the EEOC are made by women working in the food service industry. Sexual harassment doesn't occur in a vacuum. When a woman complains of sexual harassment, it is not surprising to find out that she's also been discriminated against in her pay and vice versa. As we have seen in the Me Too movement, secrecy around sexual harassment has allowed serial harassers to continue unabated. Likewise, secrecy around pay has allowed pay discrimination to remain hidden in the shadows and grow undetected and without redress. Transparency is key to closing the wage gap and ending sexual harassment. That's why I'm proud to stand here today with my colleagues, and I'm particularly thankful that the Senate President has made equal pay a top priority for this legislative session. We want to make sure that everyone is paid fairly, has the information they need to advocate for themselves, and their work is valued equally. The bill I'm introducing this year is better than it has been in the past few years, and I want to acknowledge that is both the changes in other state laws that have gone significantly farther than Rhode Island just in the past 2 or 3 years. But it's also the work of all of you. It's about people lending their voices and speaking up about what's important. We do have power. We have power when we work together and we speak up and we try and make change. You know, the legislative session is a kind of quirky setup, and we ask people to come up here at 3 o'clock to talk about how they can change laws, and that's a really difficult thing for people to do. And I want to recognize and value all of you taking the time out of your day to be able to come up here and speak up. And I think the most important message I want to get across to all of you is that is what's going to make change, is making the time, whether it's at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night when you drop an email or leave us a voicemail, to say this is important to you. We can change Rhode Island and make it a more equitable and fair society for us all. Thank you.